awake. Give me coffee. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, B. Riley. You can still find my name floating on a circle over there. And today, we're not going to waste a lot of time on chit chat because we got to get down to the bench. This thing is nearly done. I want to button it up. I want to get it together and I want to start making some noise. So let's get to it right this second. One of the interesting things about working on old guitars like this is because, when you see things that look like they need a lot of help and things that have been in such a bad way, it tends to humanize the object. I mean, we're far more fascinated with the decay of a modern ruin of a house that's Gothic Victorian from the 1800s, far more than we would be, say, at a three-story condominium in the middle of a brand new neighborhood. It's not that one is necessarily better than the other. As a matter of fact, it's quite contrary. The older house would be something that would require a great deal of energy. The newer one is a little bit more economically minded. But yet we're still drawn to these things that are worn out. I think the reason is because they represent the effect of, human interaction. There's a story there. It becomes humanized and it becomes personalized. We anthropomorphize these objects because they've been there and because they've gone through it. So it is always a little bit more fascinating to see something worn out. Okay, so here's the next problem that we have to jump over, because there's always a couple hurdles with a project, right? Is that the tuners on this guitar are completely spent. And the reason is that these F-style tuners actually have a couple of flaws with them from the factory, the vintage ones. For one thing, is that you'll see on the back of the actual sealed cover that there's a hole drilled right there. And you can see that it's a bit shiny right around its base. And the reason is because this has been resting in that hole. And over the last 50 years, this spinning has gotten loose, worn itself away, and that's what has gnashed the gears because the geometry was not appropriately held. So Fender now, when they sell you a sealed back tuner, an F-back tuner, it actually has this inside of it. It's not a reproduction, the same way that the classic inlines are. This is kind of more of a resto mod. They've modified the housing slightly. They fitted it with a slightly better part, a removable sprocket, which is kind of nice. And this little tab that snaps together and kind of holds the whole bundle together when it's assembled. It maintains the geometry a lot better, And because you have a finer tooth arrangement on this, you get much more smoother action out of the pinion as it sits with the gear really well. And they're lubricated well right from the factory, which is nice. The only problem is that if you look at the factory one, there's no collar there where it rests against the back of the headstock. Whereas this guy has a really huge collar. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take all of these apart. We're going to take all of the brand new tuners apart. We're going to completely disassemble them, and then we are going to grind this collar off. Well, folks, looks like we found another hitch. So this is the wonderful world of custom guitar building and repairs, is that, just as a reminder for you guys, obviously we were knocking down that collar on those tuners, and the reason we were doing it was because they weren't going to fit the neck. Unfortunately now, they still don't fit the neck because the cases are too big. So if you look at it, this case will not drop down and into the line because the cases are too big and the spacing on modern Fenders is different. And that brings us to one of the most important lessons of the day: when to quit for the day. So there's that. So there's a lesson for you: when to quit. Okay, you guys, so we're pretty far along, and obviously you've seen some of the effects that we've had with the stain, but what I want to show you guys is something else. This is something we touched upon lightly in the Strat video, is how to create perimeter bumps. And basically what perimeter bumps means is that anywhere along the top of the guitar or along the base of the guitar, anywhere that it may potentially be rested upon or anything like that, because obviously as we've been building this, we have been slightly leaning into it to try to match the aesthetic. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a dull knife, the worse the better, and you're not going to cut into the finish. You want to crumble the finish. So you're just going to give it a push and allow it to crumble away, just like that. Okay? Keep it clear because this will give you a better idea what you're looking at. You're just going to nudge it a little bit. We want to create a very light impact. Okay, and there you go. But you can see now that there's a problem here. We have here the contamination that makes it look a bit more genuine. Now the checking will come around. I could even hit this a little bit harder if I wanted to get grain out. Just give it another, there we go. Okay, now we've got a little nick there. Now it looks like we're ready to contaminate the wood and be ready to go, but we actually can't do that. And the reason is because the edges of the damage are a dead giveaway. If you look at the edges of the damage on this and you look across the light, you'll see that the actual edges where it gives way to the wood are smoothed off and folded in, and they kind of drop down and in. And this one doesn't have that. These, if you look across it in the light, have a jagged edge. This is another reason why I don't prefer poly-finish guitars. When they have a break like this, they don't yield. So you have an almost porcelain feel in all the worst ways of a broken porcelain resting against you if it's in an area where you're making contact. The poly is also very, very thick, so that edge has a lot of depth to it, and it's a bit uncomfortable to the hands. When it comes to nitro, the nitro is so thin and has a yield that what ends up happening is that when you get a break like this, that handling smooths it off and creates a much more pleasant environment to work in, if you will, in which you don't have something sharp stabbing you in the hands. So that's always kind of a nice touch. Okay, so what you do is you just take a little bit of compound and just drop it straight on there. Okay, and then you just hand buff it. And because the nitro is so soft, this is going to give you a really nice surface where those edges are rolled inward. And also the resin has a tendency, because you got to remember that a lot of compound has resin hidden in it. And they do this because resin is a shine promoter. It gets into the infinitesimal cracks and imperfections of the finish and kind of creates a glaze. It's almost like buffing, but buffing temporarily. As the resin starts to dry out, whatever is around starts to pick up and find its way into the wood. So now that the pores are a little bit more sealed up, we don't have to worry about this particular brand of stain, which is very, very dark, over infiltrating the pores and essentially just giving you a black spot. You can see here that we've got the grain is exposed. So what we're going to do is we're just going to give this a dab right over that one spot. I'm not going to hit this one because I already like the tone that is out. And we're just going to just rub it back and forth for a second and really let it get into the edges. Because if you'll notice here that this break is very, very believable just because you have a concentration of dirt around the edges. If you're handling this thing with your hands, you know, hand oil is going to get in there and it's going to make it look a certain way. So we're trying to replicate that, and then we just buff that off. And there you go. You've got a very convincing knock. It's not that bleached white wood finish that you would get off of bare wood, and you don't have to wait 20 years for it to actually start looking the part.
Well, guys, there you have it. Finally got that thing all buttoned up and put back together, and I'm kind of surprised by how easily it came back together. It plays wonderfully right out the gate. I've done nothing more than maybe a 2 or 3 minute setup. I have not adjusted the truss rod. I just raised the bridge and I just dropped the pickups a tiny bit. I still got to go through and clean up some of the electrics. There's some scratchy switches and some pots that are not behaving the way that they want to. But that's the thing about these. You know, they're always in progress because we are always using them. Whereas an automobile, you drive it back and forth and maybe modify it here and there and you just maintain it the whole time. With this sort of stuff, every repair is an opportunity in disguise to kind of do something different or reinvent the instrument. In this particular case, we essentially are just reinventing it into something a little bit more upscale than what it was originally. Just a, you know, standard Olympic white Jag. It did have the bound neck, which is a bit fancy for the time, and it did have the nitrate guard, which you can start to see why these things cost as much as they did back then. But essentially we just kind of took it and just pushed it a little bit further up the line with the translucent finish and the matching headstock, and then the tuners with the matching keys. How does it play? It plays awesome. It plays great. It shouldn't play that great. It should play like crap. We had everything completely apart. This guitar was neglected for a very, very long time, or at least left alone to its own devices to sit quietly in a case in the darkness of nothingness. For a long time. And typically with instruments like that, when you're putting them back together, the parts all take a lot of finesse to really get them to start cooperating with each other. We changed a bridge out. It didn't seem to change much. I guess, you know, a full-blown setup isn't as necessary as I thought. I haven't adjusted the truss rod yet. Doesn't matter. Neck is flat as a board, and there doesn't seem to be any dead spots or the frets or anything like that. So as far as this guitar, this is the end of the series for this one in particular. I don't know how you feel about it. Hopefully you guys dug it. Me personally, I love the way it sounds. It has a great, you know, gravel to the chords. You can really hear the difference between that Made in Mexico review Jaguar that we did a couple months ago and this one. They are completely different animals. As far as tone goes, this one has its own flavor, its own type of energy to it, and it sounds great, and I love playing it because it's fun. And hopefully you guys had fun watching this thing come back together. As always, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and for those of you who have already subscribed, greatly appreciated, really love it. Very encouraging to watch those numbers go the way that they're going right now. Have a beautiful afternoon. Get loud, plug in, and play. And, you know, we'll see you next week. We're going to be doing a review on a 79 Strat, which is going to be pretty interesting because it's coming for some work, and it is a fantastic and very interesting guitar. And, you know, we'll see what happens from there on. Anyway, have a beautiful day. I'm still B. Riley. My name is still floating around over there. And thanks for stopping in.